questions for Coach? Starting with Justin.
So, Tristan Bounds is limited this spring. You guys are trying to figure out the situation at tackle. What's your assessment so far through the first few weeks?
Oh, I'm extremely impressed and excited with Matthew Lotto. Lotto was able to start, what was it, the last 3 games for us, I believe. The thing I think that's interesting about our position, as well as a bunch of others, is just how important confidence is. And for him having the opportunity to be in those games and be in the mix and be a part of like meaningful games and meaningful wins has just caused his confidence to explode. And the offseason that he's had in the weight room, so now the strength is matching the confidence. He is super exciting to watch. I won't call it a surprise because it's something that everyone in the building knew was there. And now we're excited to see it kind of come to fruition. And then with Tristan being out, Louis has gotten a great amount of reps, and you guys have been doing this for a long time, and once you see those guys like actually be able to take those reps in practice, right, their growth just becomes exponential because watching is one thing, but actually going out there and having to execute, make the calls, like hearing the communication, all that stuff has been huge for him, and it's been great for building depth. Nate Hale, someone that we've had history with, I recruited him at San Jose State, and now he's here with us. He stepped in and is doing a great job as well as far as, learning the new offense, remembering some of the techniques from before. I think it's one of the deepest tackle situations that I've been a part of in a long time. Jackson Griffin is coming along. And the thing to remember about Louis and Jackson is they're both still freshmen. Right, they haven't been here for a full calendar year yet. A lot of that I have to remind myself of too at times. And then the swing guys that we have with Jackson's brother Jake, as well as Rhino. When it comes to the tackle position, and then obviously Tristan, we are very deep at tackle, which is one of those things that you look up and you're like, wait, how'd that happen?
Coach Miller was describing what it was like leading up to the Holiday Bowl, like kind of doing your day job and then also like looking at transfer film to kind of get ready for that because the timing of things and how the sequence was. How would you describe what that process was like for you, and how did you decide that Zach Henning was somebody you might look at as a potential center here?
Yeah, no, it was definitely hectic because you're trying to get your 10th win, which is, huge for any program as far as momentum building and all that. And, wanting to put the guys that are in there in the best position possible, right, focusing on the guys that are here, but also understanding, right, like what we have to do as far as getting ready for this year's team. And, when you watched Zach's tape, he jumped off the tape at you, and being in an offense that was multiple was definitely beneficial, understanding that he's been exposed to multiple things. And his athleticism that you saw on tape was also something that was really enticing. And he wasn't an easy get, I tell you that. There were a lot of people that wanted his services. But, just kind of preaching to him the opportunity to truly be developed, kind of giving him KD's story about, where KD started and where he finished and the opportunities that he has now after being in this program and being coached by us was something that was interesting to Zach. And he's kind of just jumped in the room and fit in perfectly. And that was another big part of the process, was getting around him and understanding the fit and how that would be in the room, because I do think we have a special room, and I didn't just want to add anyone to it. I wanted it to be the right fit for the guys that are in that room because, as you guys know from just our fight nights that we have at the house and the different cookouts and things like that, this group is extremely close, and I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that, and Zach was a perfect fit for not only the football side, but the social side of the room.
Brian and Justin?
What went into the decision to move Rhino inside a little bit more and give him that opportunity? Did it in any way have to do with like how he looked after coming back from injury, as far as like his performance out on the edge, maybe some tentativeness?
No, not necessarily that. Like we have full confidence in Rhino, and I think if there's a question of whether or not he can do it, I think you go back to our first season and just watch him against Utah, and the competition that he was playing against there, and his ability to perform in those settings, and even in the SMU game, where he spent most of the game at left tackle. We were able to, be competitive with him there. So there's no fear of him on the edge, if that makes sense.
But why does he work better inside?
Because I think the rest of the room, with the emergence of Matthew Lotto, right, the emergence of Tristan Bounds, the opportunity to get the best 5 on the field, him moving inside is beneficial not only for him but for us as a unit and as a team. I think the opportunity to be in a little bit more enclosed space, kind of let him use his violence and physicality a little bit more on the inside. With the amount of counter that we run and things like that, getting him on those pulls and different things like that. I think that the inside suits him a little bit better, especially with the kind of development that we've had at the tackle position. Because if you remember when he was out there, our first season, it was pretty much out of necessity for, not really having those pieces to be on the edge outside of Jonah, really. I do think prototypical guard is kind of awesome for him because of the way he plays, kind of the Mauler mentality, all that type of stuff. I just think it's a little bit better fit for him there, as well as the emergence of kind of really Matthew Lotto and Tristan Bounds.
Justin and then Michael?
Getting Bounds back, when did it become reality that you guys could actually get him for another season, and how important is it to have a guy like Tristan Bounds being able to come back?
Yeah, it was touch and go there for a minute, and it kind of put a lot of stress on us, portal-wise. To once again, like we knew what we had with Lotto, but just kind of finding another piece, right? And it put a lot of stress on us early in the portal process of trying to hunt down a replacement for him and Ty and all that, and then we get the notification, I guess, that he's good, and it was like the biggest sigh of relief through the office. But and for all the things that Tristan is, the biggest part is the experience that he brings back, with not having to break someone in completely new at that position, and the experiences that he brought with him from his previous school, as well as the things that he learned and took from this past season, has been invaluable for the room and for him. Once we got word that we were good there, it was a giant sigh of relief and a big all right, let's go push forward. And it's also great because now it gives us time to really grow the young tackles in the program, being Jackson and Louie. Again, just remembering that they haven't even been here a calendar year, and they get to learn from a guy like that.
Michael?
One of Coach Brendan's big important themes, of course, is culture, but he's also a big advocate of continuity. Very pleased to bring back most of the coaching staff, including the offensive coordinator, so you have the same system 2 years in a row. How big of a deal is that for the offensive line that you are now in year 2 of this, as opposed to having to learn something new?
It's invaluable, because it's all accrued reps, right? Everything stacks. So the more times you can hear the same terminology, the same standard, the same set of rules, the same combination of plays, it all stacks. So now this spring, instead of learning something new, we're building on what we already know. And it gives us a chance to further understand what it is we're doing offensively, schematically, as well as positionally. You have a guy like Alexander Deuced, who this is going to be his third season, hearing the same coaching points, understanding the same footwork, the same eye progression, all of that. So everything just starts to stack, so the game slows down, so to speak. There's less learning and more recall, which allows us to play faster, which allows us to essentially move to the second step for a lot of these guys. It's like the difference from going from algebra to algebra 2 to then pre-calc and calculus and so on, right? Like everything just stacks and grows and continues to build. So the longer that you can have that continuity that you speak of, the better off you are, because it's less teaching and more building on what they already know.
So putting yourself, when you were a player at Wisconsin, putting yourself in Lotto's shoes about playing early and going through those growing pains, what advice do you give Lotto during this stage as he goes from an underclassman to an upperclassman, a guy that can probably start?
Yeah, it's one of the coolest transitions because our stories are pretty similar in the sense of how we got onto the field. So, my first true playing opportunity was to replace the Outland Trophy winner. He got hurt against Ohio State, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, here you go. Here's your first game action against the number one team in the country at night. Lotto gets thrust into a situation where he has to replace, I believe it was Ty, right, in a game that's a battle. That is a battle. And, we end up winning it. I believe it was Kansas, right? We ended up winning it on a 2-minute drive. And, it's one of those deals where in that first opportunity, you really don't have time to be nervous because your number's called and you got to go. And I think that speaks to him just in general about how he prepares, and knowing that he had to prepare as if he was a starter. And one of the things that I've told him is that you have to take advantage of this opportunity, because the opportunity of a lifetime only lasts a lifetime of that opportunity. And he did that in spades with the games that he played and the games that he started. And like I said, it's propelled him to have a really great spring. We're looking for him to continue that growth, to really kind of solidify his spot on this unit this year. And the big thing that I continue to talk to him about is just enjoy the grind, because this position is a marathon, not a sprint. Goes back to those accrued reps, right? How many times can we work the non-negotiable fundamentals of the position? And I think you're starting to see that kind of blossom for him, where things are starting to become more understood and less thinking going on for him, and more of just, I know what I have to do and I know that I have to do it.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.